Hello and welcome to this video about the devastating explosion that occurred in Beirut, Lebanon on August 4, 2020. The explosion, which took place at the city's port, was one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, and it sent shockwaves across the world. This incident caused immense destruction, resulting in the loss of hundreds of lives, countless injuries, and extensive damage to the city's infrastructure. Beirut is a city with a rich history and cultural significance, but the explosion has left an indelible mark on its people and its future. In this video, we will explore the events that led up to the explosion, the immediate aftermath, the response of the authorities and the international community, the causes of the explosion, the consequences for the city and its people, and the significance of the incident for Lebanon and the world. Join us as we delve into the tragic events of August 4, 2020, and learn about the impact it has had on the people of Beirut and beyond. Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, is a city with a rich and complex history. Located on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, Beirut has been a hub of trade and culture for thousands of years, and it has been shaped by the influences of various civilizations and empires, including the Phoenicians, the Romans, the Ottomans, and the French. In recent decades, Beirut has been marked by political instability and conflict, including a long civil war that lasted from 1975 to 1990 and left the city and the country divided and traumatized. Since then, Lebanon has struggled to establish a stable government and to address the social, economic, and sectarian divisions that continue to plague the country. Leading up to the explosion, the country was facing a severe economic crisis, with high levels of inflation, unemployment, and poverty. The government was struggling to provide basic services and to address the needs of the population, and there were widespread protests against corruption and mismanagement. In this context, the explosion that occurred on August 4, 2020, came as a devastating blow to the people of Beirut and to Lebanon as a whole. The explosion was preceded by a fire at the port, which had reportedly been burning for several minutes before the explosion. The blast, which was caused by the detonation of a large amount of ammonium nitrate that had been stored in the port for several years, sent shockwaves across the city and beyond, and it was felt as far away as Cyprus, over 200 kilometers from the blast site. The explosion caused immense destruction, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, and it resulted in the loss of over 200 lives, with thousands more injured. The blast also had a profound impact on the city's infrastructure, including its hospitals, schools, and businesses, and it exacerbated the already dire economic situation in the country. In the aftermath of the explosion, the people of Beirut and Lebanon came together to support each other and to rebuild their city. However, the road to recovery has been long and difficult, and the impact of the explosion is still being felt today, both in Beirut and beyond. The explosion was later determined to be one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, equivalent to about one-fifth the power of the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945. The explosion was preceded by a fire at the port, which had reportedly been burning for several minutes before the blast occurred. The cause of the fire is still unknown, but it is believed to have been caused by welding work that was being carried out near a warehouse that contained fireworks. The blast was caused by the detonation of a large amount of ammonium nitrate that had been stored in the port for several years. The ammonium nitrate had been confiscated from a ship that was en route to Mozambique in 2013, and it had been stored in a warehouse at the port ever since. The storage of the ammonium nitrate had been a source of concern for many years, and there had been warnings about the potential danger posed by the material. The explosion caused immense destruction, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. The blast had a radius of several miles, and it shattered windows and damaged buildings across the city. The port itself was completely destroyed, and several ships in the harbor were sunk or damaged by the blast. The explosion also caused extensive damage to the city's infrastructure, including its hospitals, schools, and businesses. The immediate aftermath of the explosion was chaotic and devastating. The streets of Beirut were filled with debris, smoke, and the cries of the wounded and the dying. Hospitals were overwhelmed with patients, and many of them were forced to treat people in the streets or in makeshift facilities. Rescue teams from across the country and from other countries in the region rushed to Beirut to help in the recovery effort. The blast resulted in the loss of over 200 lives, with thousands more injured. The victims included people of all ages and backgrounds, including children, workers, and bystanders. The blast also had a profound impact on the city's residents, many of whom lost their homes, their businesses, and their loved ones in the explosion. The explosion was a tragedy of immense proportions, and its impact will be felt in Beirut and Lebanon for years to come. In the wake of the explosion, the people of Beirut and Lebanon came together to support each other and to begin the process of rebuilding their city. Volunteers and organizations from across the country and from other parts of the world came to Beirut to provide aid and assistance to those affected by the explosion. Local organizations and grassroots initiatives played a crucial role in the recovery effort, providing food, shelter, medical care, and other forms of support to those in need. Many of these initiatives were started by young people and activists who had been involved in the protests against the government that had been taking place in the months leading up to the explosion. International organizations and governments also provided assistance to Beirut and Lebanon in the aftermath of the explosion. The United Nations, the European Union, and many countries around the world pledged financial and material support to help with the recovery effort. Medical teams, search and rescue teams, and other specialists were sent to Beirut to help with the response. However, the recovery effort has been hindered by a number of factors, including political instability, corruption, and a lack of coordination and transparency in the distribution of aid. Many people in Beirut and Lebanon feel that the government has not done enough to address the needs of the population and to hold those responsible for the explosion accountable. The explosion also highlighted the need for long-term solutions to the social, economic, and political problems that have plagued Lebanon for many years. The country is facing a severe economic crisis, with high levels of inflation, unemployment, and poverty. The government has been struggling to provide basic services and to address the needs of the population, and there are widespread protests against corruption and mismanagement. The explosion has also raised questions about the safety and regulation of the port and other critical infrastructure in the country. Many people are calling for an independent investigation into the causes of the explosion and for those responsible to be held accountable for their actions. Despite the challenges, the people of Beirut and Lebanon continue to work towards rebuilding their city and their country. The explosion was a tragic event, but it also demonstrated the resilience, strength, and solidarity of the people of Beirut and Lebanon in the face of adversity. One of the main reasons why the ammonium nitrate was not removed from the port was a lack of political will and coordination among the various government agencies responsible for its disposal. There were also concerns about corruption and mismanagement, with some officials accused of using the ammonium nitrate for personal gain. In addition, there were failures in the regulation and oversight of the port and its activities. The port was known to be a site of smuggling, corruption, and criminal activity, and there were concerns about the safety of the workers and the public who frequented the area. The government was also criticized for failing to invest in the infrastructure of the port and to address the environmental and health hazards posed by its activities. The explosion was also a result of broader social, economic, and political factors that have contributed to the crisis facing Lebanon. The country has been plagued by corruption, sectarianism, and political instability for many years, and these factors have contributed to a lack of trust in government institutions and a sense of disillusionment among the population. The explosion was a tragic reminder of the urgent need for reform and change in Lebanon. The government and its institutions must take responsibility for their failures and work towards building a more transparent, accountable, and effective system of governance. This includes addressing the issues of corruption, mismanagement, and regulation that have contributed to the disaster in Beirut, as well as tackling the wider social, economic, and political challenges facing the country. The people of Lebanon have shown their resilience and determination in the face of this tragedy, and they continue to demand justice and accountability from their leaders. The international community also has a role to play in supporting the recovery effort and in holding those responsible for the explosion to account. Only through collective action and a commitment to change can Lebanon move forward from this disaster and towards a more stable, secure, and prosperous future. The explosion in Beirut on August 4, 2020 had a devastating impact on the city and its people, and its consequences are still being felt to this day. The immediate impact of the explosion was the loss of life and injury to thousands of people. Over 200 people were killed, and more than 6,000 were injured. The explosion also had a significant impact on the economy of Beirut and Lebanon. The port was a vital hub for trade and commerce, and its destruction has disrupted supply chains and caused shortages of essential goods. Many businesses in the area were also destroyed or damaged, and the loss of tourism revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic has further compounded the economic crisis. The explosion also highlighted the deep-seated social and political issues facing Lebanon. The country has been in a state of political and economic turmoil for many years, with high levels of corruption, sectarianism, and political instability. The government's response to the explosion was widely criticized for being slow and ineffective, and many people in Beirut and Lebanon feel that their leaders have failed to address their needs and concerns. The explosion also had a psychological impact on the people of Beirut and Lebanon. The trauma of the explosion and its aftermath has left many people feeling anxious, depressed, and overwhelmed. The loss of life and destruction of property has also disrupted communities and social networks, leaving many people feeling isolated and alone. However, in the aftermath of the explosion, there have also been some positive consequences. The disaster has brought the people of Beirut and Lebanon together in a spirit of solidarity and resilience. There have been widespread protests against corruption and mismanagement, and many people have been working towards rebuilding their city and their country. The international community has also come together to support Beirut and Lebanon. Aid and assistance have been provided by countries around the world, and there have been calls for an independent investigation into the causes of the explosion and for those responsible to be held accountable. The people of Beirut and Lebanon continue to work towards a better future, and the international community must continue to support them in their efforts. The explosion in Beirut on August 4, 2020 was a devastating event that shook the city and the world. It was a stark reminder of the urgent need for change and reform in Lebanon, and of the importance of addressing the social, economic, and political challenges facing the country. The causes of the explosion were complex and multifaceted, but they all pointed to the need for greater accountability, transparency, and effective governance. The Lebanese government and its institutions must take responsibility for their failures and work towards building a more just and equitable society. The international community also has a role to play in supporting the people of Beirut and Lebanon in their efforts to rebuild and recover from the explosion. Aid and assistance must be provided to those in need, and the perpetrators of the explosion must be held accountable for their actions. However, the explosion also highlighted the resilience and determination of the people of Beirut and Lebanon. Despite the challenges they face, they have shown remarkable strength and solidarity in the face of adversity. In the end, the explosion in Beirut on August 4, 2020 was a tragedy that must never be forgotten. It was a wake-up call to the world to recognize the importance of building just and equitable societies, and to support those who are working towards a better future. Only through collective action and a commitment to change can we build a world that is free from violence and suffering.